हरि ओम. उपदेशशास्त्री 1000 टीचिंग्स पद्यबंध द्वितीयो भागः मेट्रिकल चैप्टर उपोद्घात प्रकरणं चैप्टर 1 इंट्रोडक्शन. चैतन्यं सर्वगं सर्वं सर्वभूतगुहाशयं यत्सर्वविषयातीतं तस्मै सर्वविदे नमः. I bow down to that all-knowing Brahman, the all-comprehensive principle. It, like the sun, illumines everything without being an agent. One, which is pure consciousness, all-pervading, just as a rope pervades the snake in a rope snake. All, because it is the material cause of everything, residing in the hearts of all. The Sanskrit word literally means a cave. Here it stands for the intellect, of which the self is the witness of all beings and beyond all objects of knowledge, primeval ignorance and all its modifications. Now and then the Vedas begin to describe the knowledge of Brahman after dealing with all actions. In the knowledge portion of the Vedas, for the benefits of seekers after liberation, after one has acquired the qualifications such as self-control, etc., in order to be able to gain the knowledge of Brahman, both enjoined and prohibited. Sacred fire is established at the time of marriage. It burns continuously throughout one's life, and with it one's body is burnt at death. कर्माणि देहयोगार्थं देहयोगे प्रिया प्रिये ध्रुवे स्यातां ततो रागो द्वेषश्चैव ततः क्रियाः. Dharma tato and prohibited bring about one's connection with the body. When the connection with the body has taken place, pleasure and pain most surely follow. The effects of merit and demerit. The bliss of Brahman is not such an effect. Thence come attraction and repulsion. From them actions follow again. All efforts of the body, mind and speech. One who has not got the knowledge of Brahman. From them actions follow again, as the result of which merit and demerit appertain to an ignorant man, which again are similarly followed by the connection with the body. This transmigratory existence is thus going on continually forever, like a weed. अज्ञानं तस्य मूलं स्यादिति तद्धा नमिष्यते. ब्रह्मविद्यात् आरब्धा ततो निःश्रेयसं भवेत्. The cessation of ignorance is desirable, as it is the root cause of this transmigratory existence. Hence, a delineation of the knowledge of Brahman, through which comes liberation from ignorance, is commenced. Just as a snake ceases to exist immediately on once having the knowledge of the rope in a rope snake, primeval ignorance veiling Brahman in the Upanishads. Efforts of the body, the mind and the speech. Desire. विद्यैवा ज्ञानहानाय न कर्मा प्रतिकूलतः नाज्ञानस्य प्रहाणे हि रागद्वेषक्षयो भवेत्. रागद्वेषक्षयाभावे कर्मदोषोद्भवं ध्रुवम्. तस्मान् निःश्रेयसार्थाय विद्यैवात्र विधीयते. not being incompatible with ignorance. Actions do not destroy it. It is knowledge alone that does it. Ignorance not being destroyed. The destruction of desire and aversion is not possible. Actions caused by impurities are sure to follow in case desire and aversion are not removed. Knowledge alone, therefore, is taught here so that liberation from ignorance may be accomplished. Efforts of the body, the mind, and the speech, desire, aversion, and delusion in the Upanishads objections. Knowledge alone, therefore, is taught here so that liberation from ignorance may be accomplished. ननु कर्म तथा नित्यं कर्तव्यं जीवने सति विद्याया सहकारित्वं मोक्षं प्रति हि तद्व्रजेत. Objection. Obligatory duties should be performed along with the practice of knowledge as long as life lasts because these duties cooperate with knowledge in producing liberation. यथा विद्या तथा कर्म चोदितत्वा विशेषतः प्रत्यवाय स्मृतेश्चैव कार्यं कर्म मुमुक्षुभिः. As they are equally enjoined, obligatory duties and knowledge should be practiced together. Taken by those who aspire of sins also arising out of the omission of those actions, or what is remembered by human teachers. न ध्रुवफला विद्या नान्यत् किंचिदपेक्षते नाग्नष्टोमो यथैवान्यत् ध्रुवकार्योपपेक्षते तथा ध्रुवफला विद्या नित्यकर्म नित्यमपेक्षते इत्येवं केचिदिच्छन्ति न कर्म प्रतिकूलता. You may say, followed by a sure result, knowledge does not depend on anything else. But it is not so, just as Agnishtoma, though followed by an unfailing result, depends on things other than itself. So knowledge, though on obligatory duties. Reply. Some people hold this view. We say no, as it is incompatible with actions. Knowledge does not depend on them in producing its results. विद्यायाः प्रतिकूलं हि कर्म स्यात् स्वाभिमानतः. निर्विकारात्मबुद्धिश्च विद्येतिह प्रकीर्तिता. Accompanied by egoism, actions are incompatible with knowledge. For it is well known here in the Vedantas that knowledge is the consciousness that the self is changeless. I am Brahman, literally the final portion of the Vedas. Brahman itself, so a man of knowledge can have nothing to do with agency of karmas. All the grammatical cases are meant before without accepting them as true actions are not possible. अहं कर्ता ममेदं स्यादिति कर्म प्रवर्तते वस्त्वधीना भवेत् विद्या कर्तृधीनो भवेत् विधिः. Actions have their origin in the consciousness that one is a doer and has a desire of having the results of what one does. Knowledge depends on a thing, its own object and also on evidence, while actions depend entirely on the performer. कारकाण्युपमुद्गामृद्गाति विद्या बुद्धिमिमोषरे इति तत्सत्यमादाय कर्म कर्तुं व्यवस्यति. The knowledge of one's own real nature destroys the ideas of doership, etc., on the part of oneself, like the right knowledge of the nature of the desert, which destroys the conviction of there being water in it. When this is so, how can a man of knowledge accept them as true and perform actions? विरुद्धत्वादतः शक्यं कर्तो कर्म कर्तुं न विद्यया सहैव विदुषा तस्मात् कर्म हेयं मुमुक्षुणा. It is therefore not possible on the part of a man of knowledge to have knowledge and perform an action at the same time, as they are incompatible with each other. So one who aspires for liberation should renounce actions, those of which the results are desired, which are prohibited, that are obligatory, and those the performance of which becomes necessary on certain special occasions. देहादेर्विशेषेण देहिनो ग्रहणं निजं प्राणिनां तद् विद्योत्थं तावत् कर्म विधिर्भवेत्. The natural, that is not arising from the teaching of the Shastras, conviction on the part of the people that the self is not different from the body, etc. That is, the body, the senses, the mind, the intellect, vital force are their properties. Arises through ignorance. The Vedic injunctions and prohibitions are authoritative as long as it prevails. Neti neti ti dehadi napo hyatma vasheshitah avisheshatma bodhartham tena vidyani vartita. The self is left over by negating the body, etc. by the Shruti. Not this, so that one may have the knowledge of the self which is devoid of all attributes. Ignorance is brought to an end by this knowledge. Nivritta sa katham bhuya prasuyeta pramanatah asatyeva visheshepi pratyagatmane kevale. How can ignorance, once negated by Vedic evidence, arise again? This verse is an answer to the objection that ignorance, though negated, may prevail again. For it is neither in the innermost self, which is only one, without a second and without attributes, nor in the non-self. No, so the self cannot cause ignorance. No category in the domain of the non-self can cause ignorance, as all such categories are caused by it. न चेत् भूयः प्रसूयेत कर्ता भोक्तेति कथं सदस्मीति च विज्ञाने तस्मात् विद्या सहायिका. How can there again be the idea that one is a doer of actions and experiencer of their results, if ignorance does not arise after there has grown the knowledge, I am Brahman? No category in the domain of the non-self can cause ignorance, as all such categories are caused by it. So actions naturally dependent on this idea become impossible then. Knowledge therefore is independent of actions in producing liberation. अत्यरेच यदित्युक्तो न्यासश्रुत्या तयेव हि कर्मभ्यो मानसान्तेभ्य एतावदिति वाजिनाम् अमृतत्वं श्रुतं यस्मात् त्याज्यं कर्म मुमुक्षुभिः अग्निष्टोमवदित्युक्तं तत्रेदमभिधीयते. Therefore it is said by the Shruti that the renunciation of actions, including mental ones, catalogued in the Narayana Upanishad, is superior to their performance. Again, immortality is heard of in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which says this alone. Knowledge alone, independent of actions, is the cause of immortality, liberation. Hence, they should be renounced by those who aspire after liberation. We give the following reply to the objector who quoted the example of Agnishtoma. नैककारकसाध्यत्वात् फलान्यत्वाच्च कर्मणः विद्या तद्विपरीतातो दृष्टान्तो विषमो भवेत्. Knowledge is quite opposite in nature to that of actions like agnishtoma, etc. The performance of such an action becomes efficacious only when prescribed articles, mantras, Vedic formulas, etc. are used. For they are accomplished with the help of many materials and differ in the quality of the result of each individual performance. The example, therefore, is not parallel. कृष्यादिवत् फलार्थत्वादन्यकर्मोपगृहणम् अग्निष्टोमस्त्वपेक्षेत विद्यान्यत् किमपेक्षते. As it produces a result variable in quality, the agnishtoma sacrifice like agriculture, etc., requires subsidiary actions other than itself, so that the quality of result might be better. But what else will knowledge depend on? प्रत्यवायस्य तस्यैव यस्याहङ्कारयिष्यते अहङ्कारफलार्थित्वे विद्यते नात्मवेदिनः. It is only one having egoism that may incur sin by the omission of duties. The idea that one is an agent and experiencer. A man who has got self-knowledge has neither egoism nor a desire for the results of actions. तस्मादज्ञानहानाय संसारविनिवृत्तये ब्रह्मविद्याविधानाय प्रारब्धोपनिषद्द्वयम्. The Upanishads are therefore commenced in order to teach the knowledge of Brahman, so that ignorance might be removed and transmigratory existence might forever come to an end. Upanishadic terms are meant and independent of actions. Right knowledge produces liberation. This was states the main conclusion of the chapter. सदैरूपनिपूर्वस्य किप्विपि चोपनिषद् भवेत् मन्दीकरणभावाच्च गर्भादेशातनात् तथा. The word Upanishad is derived from the root Sat, prefixed by two particles Upa and Ni, and followed by the suffix Quip, so that which loosens the bondage of birth, old age, etc., enables a man to approach Brahman and destroys birth, death, etc., is called Upanishad. This root has three meanings: to slacken, to move, and to destroy. The knowledge of Brahman. In the primary sense, the books are so called. In a secondary sense only. Pratishedha Prakaranam. Chapter 2, Negation. Pratisheddhumashakyattvan neti neti sheshitam idam naham ityadha pratipadyate. Impossible, for the self is the witness of the process of negation itself. To be negated, the self is left over on the authority of the Shruti, not this, not this. So the self becomes clearly known on the reflection, I am not this, I am not this. That is, I am not the body, the senses, the mind, and the intellect and the vital forces, but I am the witness of all of them. अहं धीरिदमात्मोत्था वाचारम्भणगोचरा निषिद्धात्मोद्भवत्वात् सा न पुनर्मानतां व्रजेत. The consciousness of egoism, that is, the mistaken identity of the self with the body, etc., has its origin in the intellect. The object portion in the consciousness I. While using the word I, people mix up pure consciousness and the intellect. The intellect is the subject portion of the consciousness I. Pure consciousness is the non-object portion. Name is known. पूर्वबुद्धिमबाधित्वा नोत्तरा जायते मतिः दृशिरेकः स्वयं सिद्धः फलत्वात् स न बाध्यते. A following knowledge does not arise without negating the previous one. Example, the knowledge of the rope does not come without destroying that of the snake in a rope snake. The right knowledge of the substratum. So the knowledge of the self does not arise without destroying the previous knowledge of egoism, etc. The superimposed knowledge. Pure consciousness, the self, only has an independent existence and is never negated, as it is the result of evidence. Idam vanamatikromya shokamohadidushitam vanad gandharako yadvat swatmanam pratipadyate. One attends one's own innermost self. It is the innermost because it is the substratum of the intellect, the mind, the vital force, the body, etc., each of which is supposed by the ignorant to be the self. Innermost self, by discriminating the body and the mind from the self. The forest of this body, infested with ferocious beasts of grief, delusion, etc., like the man of the country of Gandhara, who crossed the forest and reached his own country. The story runs thus. This man, with his eyes covered and thrown in a deep forest far away from his own country, was very miserable and was crying loudly in order that the covering of his eyes might be removed. When a kind man did it and indicated the path to his country, the man then did reach his own country by remembering the instruction of the kind man. Such is the case with the disciple and the teacher. मिथ्याध्यासनिषेधार्थं ततो स्थूलादिगृह्यतां परं न चेन्निषेधार्थं शून्यतावर्णनं हि तत्. No, therefore, that the Shruti, not large, etc., is meant to negate the false superimposition of largeness, smallness, etc., on the self. as it would be a description of a void if it were meant to negate those qualities from one other than the self. बुभुत्सोर्यदिचान्यत्र प्रत्यगात्मने इष्यते अप्राणो हि मना शुभ्रे इति चानर्थकं वचः. Moreover, the saying, divide of the vital force, divide of the mind and pure would be unmeaning if these qualities were meant to be negated from one other than the individual self, the aspirant. For the vital force and the mind are possessed by none other than the individual self. It possesses them owing to ignorance, which is removed by this negation. तत्त्वज्ञानस्वभावप्रकरणम्. ईश्वरात्म प्रकरणम. चैप्टर 3 से ब्रह्मन. ईश्वरश्चेदनात्मा स्यान्ना सावस्मीति धारयेत्. आत्मा चेदीश्वरोऽस्मीति विद्या सान्या निवर्तिका. The aspirant cannot know that he is Brahman if it be different from the self. It then contradicts the Shruti. But if he was the conviction that he, the self, is Brahman, there is no contradiction to the Shruti. This is right knowledge which destroys ignorance. Atmanonyasya cheddharma asthulatvadayo mataha अज्ञेयत्वेस्य किं तैस्यादात्मत्वे यनन्यधीनुतिः. What would be the use of the description by the Shruti of the qualities not large, etc., which falsely shows that there are things other than the self? If they were the qualities of one personal God, other than the self, it being not, for it is other than the self, an object of search. But if Brahman with these qualities is the self, the ideas superimposed on the self, such as largeness, smallness, etc., are negated, and thus liberation is achieved from the latter. तत्वज्ञान स्वभाव प्रकरणम. Chapter 4, the nature of right knowledge. कधीतरी असलं दुसरं वाटेल. तत्वज्ञान प्रकरण. Chapter 4, the nature of right knowledge. अहं प्रत्ययबीजं यदहं प्रत्ययवस्थितं नाहं प्रत्ययवह्नयुष्टं कथं कर्म प्ररोहति. How can those actions of which the root is egoism and which are accumulated in the mind produce results when they are burnt by the fire of non-egoism, the right knowledge that one is neither the doer of actions and सस्यान् नान्यकर्मा सयुष्यते तन्निरोधे कसं तस्यात् पृच्छामस्तदुच्यताम्. The objector says actions burnt by the fire of knowledge may produce results like the seen ones of the actions of a man of knowledge. Reply: no, they are due to another cause. That is, those actions of past lives which have given birth to the present body and have begun to produce results. The objector: I ask you, how there can be actions when egoism is destroyed? Please answer. Even those actions that have begun to produce results, for egoism is the root of all actions. देहाद्यारंभ सामर्थ्यात् ज्ञानं सद्विषयं त्वयि अभिभूय फलं कुर्यात् कर्मान्ते ज्ञानमुद्भवेत्. Reply: such actions produce their results by overpowering the knowledge of Brahman in you, because they have the power of producing the body, etc. Knowledge, however, becomes manifest when the results of these actions come to an end. They come to an end only when they are exhausted by being experienced and one gets absolutely disembodied freedom. आरब्धस्य फले हेते भोगो ज्ञानं च कर्मणः अविरोधस्तयोर्युक्तो वैधर्म्यं चेतरस्य तु. The knowledge and the experiencing of pain and pleasure are both results of actions that have given rise to the present body, and actions are different in nature. Actions accumulated in previous states of existence and those that are done in this life after the realization of knowledge. For knowledge destroys accumulated actions and makes important those that are done in the present life after the attainment of knowledge. देहात्मज्ञानमज्ञानं देहात्मज्ञानबाधकम् आत्मन्येव भवेद्यस्य स नेच्छन्नपि मुच्यते ततः सर्वमिदं सिद्धं प्रयोगोऽस्माभिरीरितः. The knowledge of one's identity with the pure self that negates the wrong notion of the identity of the body and the self sets a man free even amongst his will when it becomes as firm as the belief of the man that he is a human being. बुद्धपराध प्रकरणम. Chapter 5. Error in Understanding. मूत्राशंको यथोदंको नाग्रहेदमृतं यथा कर्मनाशभयाज्जन्तोरात्मज्ञानाग्रहस्तथा. People do not receive self-knowledge on account of the fear that their duties according to their castes and other life would be destroyed, like Udanka, who did not accept genuine nectar which he thought was urine. This man practiced much austerity in order to please Vishnu so that he might get nectar from him, Vishnu was pleased and sent Indra with a pot full of nectar to give it to Udanka. Indra wanted to deceive him, and in the guise of a Chandal, he hung the pot containing nectar from his waist. The pot was hanging in such a way that urine would fall into it if Indra were to make water. Then he appeared before Udanka in that fashion and offered him the nectar. The latter thought the pot contained urine and refused to accept the nectar. That people do not like to receive self knowledge is due to their ignorance of the real nature of the self and a wrong and false conception about it. बुद्धिस्थश्चलतीवात्मा ध्यायतीव च दृश्यते नवगतस्य यथा वृक्षास्तद्वत् संसारविभ्रमः. The self seems to be moving when the intellect moves, and it seems to be at rest when it is at rest on account of its identification. Due to ignorance, with the intellect like trees appearing to move in the eyes of those who are in a moving boat. Similar is his conception. For people make the mistake of believing that transmigratory existence belongs to the self instead of to the intellect. Our transmigratory existence. नौस्तस्य प्रातिलोम्येन नगानां गमनं यथा आत्मनः संसृतिस्तद्वध्यायति वेति हि श्रुतिः. Just as trees are thought to be moving in a direction opposite to that of a moving boat by a man in it, so transmigratory existence is wrongly thought to belong to the self by a man who has identified himself with the intellect. For there is the passage in the Shruti as if at rest. चैतन्य प्रतिबिंबेन व्याप्तो बोधो हि जायते बुद्धे शब्दादिभिर्भासस्तेन मुह्यते जगत्. The modifications of the intellect are pervaded by the reflection of consciousness when they come to exist. So the self appears to be identified with sound, etc. This is the reason why people are deluded. The objects of the modifications of the intellect, that is the body, etc. For unable to distinguish between the self and its reflection, people attribute the properties of the intellect to the self. Chaitanya bhasyatahamastadharthyam cha tadasyat idamamsha prahanena parasso nubhavo bhaveta. As it is the object of your consciousness and exists for the agency and experience of the self is due to the superimposition of the ego in it. For it, the ego is not the self. Pure consciousness is the universal self. What appears to be the individual self owing to the proximity of the ego in the object portion of the consciousness I, that is the ego, is rejected. That is when the identification of the self with the ego is known to be due to a wrong conception. विशेषापोह प्रकरणम. Chapter 6. Negation of attributes. छित्त्वा त्यक्तेन हस्तेन स्वयं नात्मा विशिष्यते तथा शिष्टेन सर्वेण येन येन विशेष्यते. The self itself is not qualified by an arm which has been cut off and thrown away. Similarly, it is not qualified by any of the remaining things by which it is thought to be qualified. the gross and subtle bodies and their attributes. तस्मात् त्यक्तेन हस्तेन तुल्यं सर्वं विशेषणम् अनात्मत्वेन तज्ज्ञात् तस्माज्ञो मुक्तस्सर्वैर्विशेषणैः. Therefore all the qualifications are similar to the arm cut off and thrown away, as they are all non-self, for they are all superimposed on the self. So the self is free from all qualifications. विशेषणमिदं सर्वं साध्वलङ्करणं यथा अविद्याध्यासतः सर्वं ज्ञात आत्मन्यसद्भवेत्. It is reasonable that, like ornaments falsely appearing to be the qualifications of the wearer, all these are qualifications of the self owing to superimposition through ignorance. When the self is known, they prove to be unreal. ज्ञातैवात्मा सदा ग्राह्यो ज्ञेयमुत्सृज्य केवलः अहमित्यपि यद्ग्राह्यं व्यपेताङ्गसमं हि तत्. After rejecting the object portion, pure consciousness, the witness, the I, ego. One should accept the self as the knower, pure consciousness, the witness, free from all qualifications. The ego, though to the ignorant it appears as self, the object portion is also like the part of the body cut off. यावान् स्यादिदमंशो यस्य स्वतोऽन्यो विशेषणं विशेषप्रक्षयो यत्र सिद्धो ज्ञश्चित्रगुर्यथा. The self of which the whole of the object portion in the consciousness I is the qualification is different from it, bereft of all qualifications. It has an independent existence like that of a man possessing a variegated cow. The man has an existence independent of the cow. So has the self an existence independent of the ego, etc. Its qualifications, it having no connection with them. इदमंशोऽहमित्यत्र त्याज्यो नात्मेति पंडितैः अहं ब्रह्मेति शिष्टांशो भूतपूर्वगतेर्भवेत्. As it is not the self, the object portion in the consciousness I should be renounced by the wise. As it was mixed with egoism, it is mixed with the self, just as a snake may be said to be mixed with a rope in a rope snake, that is, a rope mistaken for a snake. Previously, just as a military captain is called a captain, even after he has retired, so we call pure consciousness I, even after it has been discriminated from the ego. The remaining non-object portion is implied by the word I in the sentence I am Brahman, pure consciousness. बुद्ध्यारूढ़ प्रकरणम. Chapter 7. Knowledge through the intellect. बुद्ध्यारूढ़ं सदा सर्वं दृश्यते यत्र तत्र वा मया तस्मात् परं ब्रह्म सर्वज्ञश्चास्मि सर्वगः. I am the Supreme Brahman, all-knowing and all-pervading. As pervaded, for the word arudha in the by the intellect, all things in waking or dream, either in this world or in the next, known either through the senses or inference or from the scriptures, etc. All pervaded by the intellect of all things in all conditions are always illumined by me. Just as a lamp is different from the objects it illumines, so I am different from all objects illumined by me, pure consciousness. यथात्मबुद्धिचाराणां साक्षी तद्वत् परेष्वपि नैवापोढुं न वादातुं शक्यस्तस्मात् परो ह्यहम्. Just as I am the witness of all the objects of my intellect, so I am that. Being witnessed, difference cannot pertain to the witness, so there cannot be more than one witness. I am that of the object of other intellects. I am not capable of being rejected. None can say that the self is not the witness or not at any place, as it is all knowing and all pervading. I am not capable of being rejected or accepted. Therefore, I am the Supreme Brahman. Vikaritvam Shuddhatvam Bhautikatvam Nacha, not the illuminator in my presence, changeless like sunlight. All things are therefore illumined by me like sunlight. बुद्धौ दृश्यं भवेत् बुद्धौ सत्यां नास्ति विपर्यये द्रष्टा यस्मात् सदा द्रष्टा तस्मात् द्वैतं न विद्यते. Objects of knowledge exist in intellect as long as it is there in waking and dream, but they do not exist in the opposite case, for there is no evidence that non-conscious things exist when unknown, when the intellect is merged during deep sleep. The knower is always the knower, for the self never ceases to exist like the intellect, its modifications, or the objects of knowledge. Therefore, they must be unreal. But the self which always exists must be real and pure. Duality has therefore no existence. Avivekat parabhavam yatha buddhirave tatha vivekat tu paradanya swayam chapi na vidyate. The intellect knew the non-existence of the Supreme Brahman before. Here the intellect is spoken of as having delusion, for it is an account of the mutual superimposition of the self and the intellect that all delusion arises. Otherwise, the intellect itself cannot be spoken of as deluded or otherwise, as it is non-conscious. The intellect knew the non-existence of the Supreme Brahman before the discrimination between the self and the non-self. But after the discrimination, there is no individual self different from Brahman, nor is there the intellect itself. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.